Today's lecture topic is Introduction to Toxicology, Occupational and Environmental. So, you studied toxicology already and you are familiar with the common toxins and the antidotes for them. And here we will study the toxicology effects to the human body and also the chemical agents, and we'll focus on adverse effects on humans and what happens after the exposure to the drugs and other toxins. So to be sure to uh, uh, to keep safe for the people that work in hazard conditions. And toxicology can be occupational, and occupational toxicology usually deals with the toxins in the workplace. So like here, this is a metallurgical plant. And as you can see, the worker here, Chinese probably, is wearing a gasket and a mask to protect. So this is a large mask to protect from the poisonous chemicals that are on the working table. And toxicology, the occupational toxicology identify the toxins that may lead to the acute or chronic diseases, and also can define the conditions which are required to use these toxins safely to prevent the absorption of the toxic levels of these chemicals through the skin, lungs, or any other way. So they also regulate the maximal exposure rates for the workers during the work, and also limit the concentration of the chemicals in the air and water. There are several government organizations that control the healthy the rules that regulate these amounts, and I'm sure you already studied hygiene. So, and there are many voluntary organizations that keep an eye on the hygiene at work and regulate these maximum limits for the toxins, and so they also publish some recommended threshold limit values, or TLVs, for the toxins, so to make sure that the guidelines are following these limits. And the second one is an environmental toxicology that deals with the chemicals that pollute the environment. So we already studied environmental toxicology during the botany course. So environmental toxicology includes everything, including the human body, and then the air pollution, water pollution, soil pollution, and also the microplastic pollution. So not only humans are monitored by the environmental toxicology, the fish and animals are also in the target, because they are source of the food for the humans, so humans can obtain the toxins through consuming the animals as well. So that is why animals are also important for the toxicology. And air pollution is mostly the uh, results from the industrialization. The most plants will pollute the air, and the smoke will actually then precipitate with the rain to the nearby uh, territories, and that can make the exposure to the chemicals and also of the people, and also the agricultural uh, soils, and then these cultural products can be eaten by the humans. So uh, and then there is also ecotoxicology. Ecotoxicology uh, is concerned with the toxic effect of chemicals and on populations and communities. So hope you remember the what is the population and community. So this is actually from the botany course. So population is actually the same species, and community are different species in a specific location. So, and also it regulates the ecosystems. So like here you can see that this in this ecosystem we have a plant that produces the nitrogen oxide and sulfur oxide, that then precipitates uh, as an acid to the trees, and that makes trees not so green. So that then this is absorbed by the plants, and then goes to the soil, and then goes to the lake, and then evaporates from the lake, and then goes back to the air. So this is actually a circle. And so this ecotoxicology studies the ways of the transfer of toxins and interaction of the toxins with the environment. Uh, and ecotoxicology uh, deals with the impact of the toxins on populations and ecosystems. So like ecosystems are like a very large uh, number of communities located in a specific place. So for example, ecosystem of the Tatarstan, like a region of the country. Uh, then there are several definitions for the toxicology, and the first definition is a hazard and risk. So, and hazard is a potential that can harm a person, but it's like not, it's just the probability of the some hazard, and uh, and depending on the conditions it can be or not to be. So and the risk is a likelihood of the hazard to cause a harm. So uh, so actually uh, So if the hazard is just a potential, so if this person will not swim in the sea, then he will never be eaten uh, by the shark. But if he swims in the sea, there is some probability of being eaten by a shark. So, like for example, it can be 50%. And depending uh, on the uh, local, like depending on the sea, like and the uh, distance from the shore, the probability of the being eaten by the shark can be higher or lower. And the toxicology is will will answer you to the question. So will be you eaten by the shark or not if you are swimming at a distance of 5 miles from the shore in this particular Baltic Sea. Uh, Sandy, do you have a sea in Egypt?
Yes, of course.
So what is the name of the sea?
We have the Red Sea.
So how are there many shark attacks to the swimmers in the Red Sea?
No,
No, really?
no.
The last one was about 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Okay. So there is some risk, right?
Of course, there is some risk, yes, but it's a very low risk.
Very low. Okay. So they don't usually they make uh, some ways to reduce the risk, because if people will know that there is high risk to be eaten by shark in the sea, they will not swim in the sea. That will decrease the amount of the tourists, and decreases the attractiveness of the hotel. So it's not good for the business. And the
Mhm.
same is uh, in the like for example in the plant, like in the industry. So uh, if the workers will know that this particular uh, plant is dangerous for their health, they will not work. So that will lead to higher salaries, like, and then uh, some people can sue uh, the the labor, so the company that runs the plant, and then actually this is also not good. So that is why and toxicology actually helps the industrial toxicology will help with the evaluation of this risk, and reducing the risk as well. Okay, then there are several routes of exposure. So primary is the skin contact. For the industrial pollution, the skin is the primary. Then air is the secondary, and the last one is the exposure by the uh, food, and uh, uh, so and that is why a prevention of the toxic uh, uh, exposure to the toxic substances is to reduce the absorption by contact with the skin, and also by the air. So by the air is reduced by using a mask, and then by skin is used by using the protective cloth. And the most the most uh, uh, the most well-known exposure to the toxin is the uh, tetraethyl uh, uh, plumbum. What is a plumbum in English? Sandy,
What is a what?
plumbum chemical.
Um, I think
Mercury?
it's lead.
Yes, lead. So the most well-known exposure to the uh, toxin is the tetraethyl lead that is have been used for the production of the gas. So you probably heard about that uh, when so in 1920s when the first automobiles were manufactured, uh, they they used an alcohol as a fuel, so instead of the gas. So then when the oil was discovered, and then they started to produce gas from the oil. So um, and this gas was destroying the engine, internal combustion engine of the vehicle. So they added an tetraethyl lead to reduce this to prevent this. So that is actually helping not to make a knock in the engine. So uh, and that compound was not was very toxic, but this toxicity was a very uh, slow acting. So the it lead to the slow intoxication, and then the lead was accumulated in the bones and in the body and lead to the some chronic diseases. But this toxicity was not studied well, so that is why it's only until 1980s when they banned the tetraethyl lead to prevent the further deaths, because there were many death from these compounds or from the gas. So like you drive to the gas station, then uh, and it was uh, uh, the exposure was by the airway and also by the skin, and those people that work at the uh, oil production, sorry, gas production industries even died from the from that chronic exposure. So like, and for the any toxin we have two types of exposure: acute, that is usually one time and leads to the large amount of damage, and then the chronic. The chronic is actually occurs with the repeated exposure of small amounts, and usually chronic is developed when the toxin is accumulated in the body. So the most common way of the chronic exposure is smoking. So those people that smoke, they uh, they uh, they breathe a toxin. So uh, and actually that is not good for the health. Then also we should take into account the environmental considerations, and certain number of the uh, substances are important for the environmental toxins, and environmental considerations take into account the different organisms and the impact of them to the environment, and also the degradability of the toxins, uh, morbidity of the toxin in the air, water, and soil. So whether bioaccumulation occurs. So bioaccumulation is accumulation of the in the body, and if biomagnification through the food chain occurs, when like the uh, small fish will expose to the toxin, and then larger fishes will eat the small fishes, so and they will consume the more toxins because like they will absorb through the skin, but also by with the oral way, and because the small fish will accumulate already the large amount of the toxin, then the large fish will be exposed to an even higher level of the toxins. And the most common chemicals in the environment include the pesticides. So here we can see organochloride pesticides that are used to prevent the pests from eating the crops, and usually uh, they contain polyfluorinated biphenyls. So this is two phenyls connected with the methyl bridge, and there are several chlorine uh, atoms here in the cycle somewhere. So depending on the amount of the chlorine, they can be more or less active, and these substances are lipophilic, and they accumulate in fat. So that is why if a person is overweight, then it will accumulate more, and then it slowly releases, and will act on metabolic ways, and can lead to the chronic adverse effects, usually an dysfunction of the endocrine system. Uh, then they can also uh, make a biomagnification, and because humans are at the top of the food chain or food pyramid, then uh, they are exposed to the higher concentrations, and because of the biomagnification and bioaccumulation. Uh, and these pollutants can be found in the air, water, and soil, and may lead to the biomagnification and bioaccumulation. So here the slide will explain what is a biomagnification. And usually the toxins that are in the animals are not in a high concentration. And for the bioaccumulation, so it's accumulation in the single organism body over time. So for example, the mercury in the fish is that mercury entering the water through the industrial uh, process. So plants usually will throw away the water to the lakes and rivers. Then this goes to the sea, and then fish and absorb the mercury from the water, and they absorbed it, and throughout their life they can absorb much, because some fish can live for like hundreds of years, and it remains in the body of the fish for a long time, and then once the fish is caught by the fisherman, then he will eat the fish, or they sell fish to the other people that will eat that fish, and then actually this may result in a toxicity. Then the so then some pollutants may be absorbed by the microscopic phytoplankton. So phytoplankton is a food for a small fish, so that is at the bottom of the food pyramid. Then these phytoplankton absorbed small amounts of the poison, but the zooplankton is eaten by the zooplankton eating the phytoplankton. So there are some larger microbes that will eat the microplankton, and then they consume all the accumulated toxins, like for example polychlorinated biphenyls, and then the small fish will feed on the zooplankton that magnifies again, and then in the large fields some large fish will eat, like for example here a whale. The killer whale will eat the small fish, and that end up with a larger concentration. And nowadays whales are not used for hunting, so like in the beginning of the previous century, like in 90s, they so in the 18th, even in the 19th century, they hunted the whales to obtain oil that is used for the lighting of the for the candles. So this oil so is used to obtain a light. But later they invented a bulb, an electricity bulb. So and then there were no need to hunt these large whales. And then they actually increased in population. And yes, thank you for the National Geographic for this slide, because it's actually very important. Biomagnification and bioaccumulation. Okay, and then we go to the specific pollutants. There are primary pollutants and secondary. So primary pollutants are directly emitted to the atmosphere from the automobiles and chimneys. So these are the particulate matter produced by the internal combustion engine, because of the this is smoke of the engine. Depending on the engine, can be more or less. Also, particle matter will result from the friction of the tires. Because tires are made from the resin, and it can burn while in a heavy stopping of the engine, emergency brake of the engine of the vehicle, and also from the disc rotor and the brake mechanism or brake pads. But recently they started to produce an ecologically more environmental disc pads like uh, 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 originally they were produced from the uh, asbest that is more toxic, and nowadays they produce it from the uh, some recycled material, and also from the ceramic, but ceramic is more expensive. Then sulfur dioxide is also a common exhaust gas. So sulfur is actually toxic. The nitrogen dioxide is not so toxic, but may become toxic with further uh, reactions with the water. Then ammonia is also not so toxic, but can lead to the pH to the acid rains. And then volatile organic compounds are very toxic, and methane is also quite toxic. Then secondary pollutants are the particulate matter that is secondary to the primary particulate matter, and ozone. Ozone is not very toxic, but can be formed in the atmosphere uh, uh, because of the reactions between the primary air pollutants. So, but in high concentrations, ozone is toxic. So, low concentrations are not toxic, but high concentrations may be toxic. The uh, and the primary so the most toxic air pollutant is a carbon monoxide. It is a colorless gas. So here the uh, threshold limit values are presented for some compounds like carbon monoxide, for example, and uh, then nitrogen dioxide, ozone. Like you can see, ozone is like uh, very very low. Uh, so uh, so this concentration of the threshold limit values are in particles per million. So it's like special uh, uh, commonly used in because very low, even very low values of this can lead to the toxic. Like for example, relatively non-toxic, we have 3,4-ethane, and then also uh, carbon monoxide, but this is a lethal, like but still, and then also toluene and 3,4-ethylene. So okay, carbon monoxide is a colorless, tasteless, and odorless, and it is non-irritating gas, and it is the product of the incomplete combustion, usually in internal combustion engines, like the most commonly used engine at the moment on the planet. And the concentration of in the air is about 0.1 particles per million, or parts per million. So in heavy traffic, the concentration may increase up to the 100 parts per million, and so the recommended threshold limit is 25. Right, normally it's 0.1, so 0.1 is actually a normal or natural concentration. So, and most common sources of the carbon monoxide is cigarette smoke, then the car exhaust, and house fires, or the forest fires, and then boilers and furnaces. Boilers are used for the heating during the winter. Usually they use natural gas. So and that is why the special systems to remove these gases should be in place. So to prevent the contamination and the deaths. So depending on the concentration, the carbon dioxide will replace an oxygen in the hemoglobin, and then even a slight increase of the carbon dioxide will lead to the high increase in the carboxyhemoglobin, and that saturation will lead to the headaches, nausea, dizziness, breathlessness, collapse, and eventually loss of consciousness and death. So that is why carbon dioxide is very dangerous, because it can lead to the death in even small concentrations. For the patients that are exposed to the high concentrations, even the special treatment may be required in the camera. This usually includes the firemen that or people that were in the house fires. So and like were exposed for a long time. Then there is also sulfur dioxide, and sulfur dioxide is also colorless. It is irritant gas, and primarily obtained from the combustion of the sulfur-containing fuels. So for the sulfur dioxide, we have a higher threshold limit value, and the sulfur dioxide forms for the irritates the eyes, mucous membranes, and skin, and then it is inhaled and absorbed in the lungs, and the inhalation of the gas leads to the bronchial constriction, parasympathetic system activation, and increasing of the smooth muscle tone. And then that leads to the resistance in the airflow, and then bronchospasm, and Also, patients with asthma are more sensitive to the sulfur dioxide. The symptoms of intoxication include the irritation and the asthmatic symptoms. Then the treatment should be done with the anti-asthmatic medicine, and edema may be observed in the patients afterwards. Then the accumulation may occur, and that increases the toxicity, and there is no specific treatment. So the treatment is actually symptomatic, usually includes the anti-asthmatic drugs. Then nitrogen dioxide and other oxides, also irritant gas with a brown color, and usually seen in the fires, and can be also smelled from the fresh silage. So the specific pleasant odor of the silage is from the nitrogen oxide. So, and that is why farmers are commonly exposed to the nitrogen dioxide. And it is called a Xylophilas disease. Nitrogen dioxide is insoluble in the lungs and leads to the edema, and alveolar cells are exposed to the nitrogen dioxide, and it irritates eyes and can lead to the edema, pulmonary edema, and chronic pulmonary lesions, and even the death, depending on the concentration. So the lethal concentration should be 100 parts per million. The signs of the exposure are irritation of the eyes, cough, the dyspnea, and chest pain. The edema may occur in several hours, and clinical signs subside after several weeks. Then chronic exposure resulted in the emphysematous changes in animals, and the same should be in the humans. There is no specific treatment. The treatment is symptomatic. Usually for the edema, it's adrenaline is injected intravenously to reduce the edema, pulmonary edema, for the acute treatment of the pulmonary edema. Then oxygenation and ventilation is required. Then some antibiotics and bronchodilators can be used for the treatment. Then the next substance is ozone, and ozone is actually is a normal part of the air, is a irritant gas that helps to protect from the ozone layer, helps to protect from the ultraviolet of the sun, and in the workplaces, ozone can be produced because of the high voltage electrical equipment, like the in metallurgical plants, or around the ozone producing devices that are used for the water and air purification, and also can be found in the urban air, and so the threshold limit value is very low, so that is why it's very easy to be exposed to the ozone. It is irritating the mucous membrane, and severe exposure can lead to the lung irritation with the pulmonary edema, and then toxicity is because of the formation of reactive free radicals, and then bronchial constriction can also occur. Uh, at low concentrations, the ozone can lead to the irritation and dryness of throat, and in high concentration it can lead to the visual disturbances, pain and dyspnea, and airway restriction can be seen in even higher concentrations. And there is no specific treatment, and the management also symptomatic. So treatment of the edema. So then, okay, I think we can stop here, and then we can continue during the practice. So these are the most common air pollutants, and then we will other like the solvents and pesticide we will discuss during the practice. Then actually I think most of them you are already familiar from the botany. Okay, thank you very much for your attention, and see you next week. Bye bye.